Hey, Val.
Okay, we'll call to order the December 7th meeting of the Ramsey-Washington Metro Watershed District. Item number 2 is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call. Who's
All right,
gonna- You're gonna do roll call?
I'll do it. Yep.
Okay.
Pam,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
and Larry.
Aye. Next item is the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything that they want taken out of the consent agenda?
I'd like the permit 2237 discussed when we discuss maintenance and repair projects. That makes sense.
Sure.
You want the permit removed and not put with the permit program?
Right,
Or with the CIP program?
right. Put it with the CIP.
So after 7A.
Yeah, or with it, whatever.
Okay.
And then the other thing I don't want to remove, but the minutes referred to the CIP proposals that were presented last meeting. They weren't in the minutes and they weren't in the packet, last meeting packet. We got it at the meeting, I think. So should be somewhere,
The list of projects.
right?
I think they were in the packet, but I could be,
Could you just check?
yeah, I'll check.
Yeah, you don't need to now, but just make sure they were either in the packet that's online or attach them to the minutes.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with item number C being taken out? So moved. Second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. I have one discussion item. In the check log, there's a payment to the Fish and Water Conservation Fund. What's that? It came out of the stewardship fund.
Oh,
I believe that was for the like Coleman chain. They're doing some aquatic veg removal, and that's the organization they go through. So that was the payment to them for that aquatic veg harvesting.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call.
Pam.
Keep looking at you.
Pam,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Diane,
Aye.
and Larry.
Aye. Next, thank you. Next item on the agenda is visitor comments. Anybody, do we have any visitors that want to comment? Nope.
Patrick's
Eric?
here for permit 22-36 Enclave Apartments. So unless there's anything you have prepared.
And then there is somebody on the Zoom as well. I'm not sure, Joe Tillotson.
Dawson.
That's our Joe,
Joe.
intern Joe.
Oh, intern Joe. Hi, intern. Hi, Joe.
Hey, everyone.
He looks
Sorry.
different when you're not here.
Yeah, right.
Okay, got it. All righty, no visitor comments. Moving on to item number 5. Permit program application 2236, the Enclave Apartments in Maplewood.
Yeah, so I can kick that off. The applicant is proposing, I don't know if you're familiar with the Midnight Club by the Maplewood Mall. The property was sold, and so the applicant's proposing to demo that building and construct apartments. There's above and below ground stormwater treatment proposed. And then the application does include a variance request for temporary wetland buffer disturbance. I don't know if you've looked closely at the variance, but there's photos. There's a retaining wall that's kind of falling into the pond. So they're proposing to take that out, rebuild it, and then actually expand the buffer over what's existing, because there's really almost nothing there right now. It's almost pavement right up to the retaining wall. So, but nonetheless, it's disturbance in the buffer. So they've included a variance. And they also had to get a wetland delineation done and no loss approval for that work as well. So if there's any questions that I or Patrick can answer, be happy to.
Well, it seems like a good development at many levels when you come to it.
Yeah,
And
there's no
I
existing.
like the work they're gonna be doing with the buffer and the wetlands and things like that, so it seems reasonable.
Yeah, there's some cool plantings proposed.
Yeah,
And right now the site doesn't have any treatment because it was constructed before our rules were in place. So,
May I ask a quick question real quick, Nicole?
yeah.
I like the direction of all of it. I was just curious why it's an 8 to 36% in terms of the permeable area reduction. I mean, any reduction is good reduction, but I was curious what led to that such a large range.
I thought it was from 8 to 36%, but let me pull that up.
Yeah, 8 to. Did I say that
Eight.
wrong?
8 in existing conditions to 36% in.
Oh, I might have misread it then. I thought it was represented as a range.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, so there'll be a net increase in pervious area on the site.
Oh, so it's a net increase too. I missed that as well. I apologize. I thought it was a decrease.
right.
No, that's okay.
You get a COVID pass, sorry. Okay,
Yeah, I guess that could be read two different ways.
yeah.
Yeah, good
You're right,
clarification.
yes, exactly. It seems like a really good development there, and I think, like the people in the neighborhood, as they say, are gonna be happy about the change in that, area, so.
I'll miss the next one.
Yeah.
It brings back all good memories.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Everyone has memories of that.
Life has changed.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, do I have a, motion to approve, permit number 2236? Second, any further discussion? Okay, roll call.
Yep, Pam,
I,
Matt,
All right.
Diane,
Right.
and Larry.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you.
okay, thanks for coming. Thanks for doing this. Okay, any further discussion, Nicole, on the report?
I don't have anything unless there are questions. Construction's obviously kind of winding down right now.
Right,
But a number of projects are going with their interior building work. Goldline is going to be working on doing some bridge work over the winter, but for the most part, a lot of sites are kind of going dormant for the time being.
Can you close 3?
Yeah,
mhm. That's a good thing.
yeah, one of them was actually kind of a withdrawal. They didn't complete the project. They're selling it to a new developer, so that'll be a new permit coming in.
Okay.
But we were holding their escrow, so wanted to close that out. Yeah,
Okay. All righty, moving on to item number 6, which is the stewardship grant program. And we have a presentation.
Yes, I think that's
Okay.
me. Let me share. Okay. You can see my presentation slide, right?
Yep.
Yep, awesome. Okay, so I'm going to make this fairly quick, but definitely jump in with questions. I just want to save time. Michael has the more interesting part of our presentation coming up about the street sweeping. So I will just go through a little summary and talk about potential changes for the 2023 Stewardship Grant Program. Start out with just a map of all the project locations from this year. So we had 34 projects approved. You can see the breakdown. Most of them were residential, a few government projects, one school, one church, and one homeowner association. And this falls in line with what we've seen in the past. We had 41 last year. I think we had like 52 in 2020, but we'll chalk that up to COVID year. But we'll look at our budget status report coming up and how much we spent. And then I do want to point out the red stars. I don't know if you can read those numbers on the big screen, but we had 30 stewardship grant projects. Those are actual structural BMPs that are in the ground. So the other ones we approved, the aquatic veg harvesting, one vegetation management plan, and then the street sweeping in Woodbury, and then one other, can't think of off the top of my head, but one other non-structural grant project. So here's a little bit more, or some detail of the breakdown. You can also see that on the budget status report. We have about $128,000 that were unallocated that will go into next year's budget. So, I think this was, I can't remember what we had last year, but I think we spent more funds this year. It was great to see the 5 projects in our priority areas for the, either infiltration or filtration projects. It's nice to see that large amount of money spent in the areas where we need the most water quality help, I guess. We had a few more residential rain garden projects this year than we did last year, but still a high number of habitat restoration. And I think we'll continue to see that as we have these drier years, as people want to find ways to decrease the amount of potable water they're putting on their lawns, how much irrigation they have to do. Seems to be the driving factor with people looking for lawn alternatives. We did have a number of site visits that happened throughout the season that didn't amount to projects, which is typical of any year, but a higher majority of them this year seemed to be because people couldn't find contractors. We have our list of recommended, suggested contractors that we work with that we send to people, and they were just busy this year, didn't have the capability to take new projects on. So hopefully we'll see some of those projects go forward next year. And then this is a breakdown. I have this every year, but just added 2022 to it to show the spread of projects, the distribution throughout the watershed district. We've spent a total of $7.3 million on the program, 426 projects, an average of about 17,000 per project. So it's kind of nice to see where all those projects are going. And then our targeted retrofit projects, pretty, I would say, successful program. Started in 2013. 2012 was when we started the outreach. But we've had 31 projects go in, starting with churches and schools, and now we're focusing more on commercial sites. And I'll talk a little bit more about our 2022 projects coming up. Inspections this year, thanks to Mary and Simba, and then a little bit, Emily will be taking over next year for that. But I think, and I know, talking to other watershed districts, our inspection program surpasses what other people are doing, which is pretty great to see. And we've seen a lot of improvement over the years. A little hard to tell on the colors here maybe, but the 72% is A's, not F's. So we had majority of excellence, or people keeping up with their maintenance, really, and when Mary and Sima go out there, those are the ones that we like to see, and they maybe just need a little bit of advice on what to do, but they're overall doing a great job. Those B's, that 22%, maybe just a little bit more weeding or general adding mulch or adding plants. C's, maybe there's something a little bit bigger, an erosion issue or something like that. And then we had one F, so a project that I think this one was holding water, so they had to do a little bit extra to get it back into shape. Then you can see on the bottom, just the number of inspections that they've done is crazy. I think 2019 Mary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was only Mary doing inspections in 2019. And then slowly we've taken a little bit more of Simba's time to help with those inspections. So they can split those up throughout the years. This year, if you remember from the previous slide, we've had over 400 projects installed that need to be inspected at some point. Some of those have fallen off our 5-year residential maintenance grant or maintenance agreement commitment, so they no longer require an inspection. We still have them on our list in case people have questions or whatnot. Simba sends out, I don't know if it's every 2 or 3 months, she sends kind of a maintenance update. This is what you should be doing to your rain garden or native planting. So that's helped. And then also our maintenance grant has been great. That started in 2018 and is the only one like it that I've heard of in the metro as far as maintenance grants for people. Other watershed districts are looking at that, but we're the only one who has implemented it so far. And with that grant, people can apply for 5 years of maintenance. So the grant covers 50% of those maintenance costs, up to $1,000 per year for 5 years. And we're seeing, that's one request that I have, is to increase that for 2023. Mainly, we're just seeing, cost of everything is going up. And that's the one area. Our regular grant coverage for the actual project seems to still be sufficient. We haven't had anyone, I don't think this year, come in past. We've had people ask for additional funds if we thought it was necessary, but we didn't seem to hit that this year, despite the higher cost. But with maintenance, people were exceeding that cap. So that's one request, is to increase that so that we can help people keep up with that maintenance over the years. Our BMP maintenance program, another great successful year. This was the end of our 2-year contract. So we had 3 contractors that we worked with on 30 sites. Those were, from Maplewood Mall to our past targeted retrofit projects. All of our school projects are on there. And then a few natural resource sites that we added to that list, just to make sure that they were getting the attention they need. And then we'll send out a new RFQ in 2023, and we're going to have that one be for 3 years. So until 2025, just, we've seen these contractors do great work. It seems to be easier on them when they can schedule the work out ahead of time and know what they're getting into. Not all the sites will be on there every year. So we have details in that RFQ to allow us to change that each year, change the dollar amounts as needed. And you will see that probably in February or March when we issue that for request for bid for the 2023 season. Our targeted retrofit projects, I think most of you, I can't remember who was all at the tour, but I think most of us were at the tour where we stopped at Mounts Park Academy. That was a school project where the school wanted to remove an entire bay of parking. They just don't need it. So we jumped on that opportunity. They have existing science programs where they spend a lot of time outside. The kids are out there doing a lot of hands-on stuff. I know Matt has worked with them, and Sage, getting those kids out doing lots of different things, from maintenance to planting to whatever else they do in science class, looking at pollinators out there. So they were excited to add some more native plants to the rain garden, increase that buffer to the existing pond. And then it's hard to see here, but in the far side of the picture, they added an outdoor classroom, which school paid for that part. We just helped construct it. The landscape designer that we worked with from Bar actually graduated from Mounts Park Academy. So she was really excited to work on that design and work with this principal and science teacher to get that outdoor classroom incorporated. And then St. Pascal's Church in St. Paul, also hard to see here, but where those cones are, there's a tree trench installed, and then a rain garden in the corner of the parking lot. So the plants went in this fall, the trees will go in next spring. The church has been very involved throughout the planning process, construction process, and they're working with Sage to do some education and outreach. They have a daycare maybe a school to K-6, I think that goes there. So they're looking to get some classroom activities incorporated, which is always fun. And then Sage works closely with Mounds Park, so we'll have that continuing partnership there. 2023 projects are in the works. We're still in the early phases of design. The Lake Emily project in Shoreview is a little further along. I believe Leslie from BAR will be here next month to tell you more about that. They'll be looking at a filtration system near Lake Emily to help filter water before it goes in there. And then this Roosevelt Homes is a they have I don't even know how many units, townhouses, condo type units that, as you can see here, experience a lot of flooding issues. This was after a pretty big storm event in August, but this is not uncommon for them when we get big rainfalls. Their parking lots, where the car is, that's the parking lot. Thankfully only one car there, but they're pretty useless for several hours after a big rain event like this. Obviously, car damage and not very safe for folks in that area. And then also on the bottom picture, that's one of their playgrounds that pretty much becomes useless for several days just due to all that water. So working with BAR to look at ways to help alleviate some of that for them. And we'll bring that back shortly. So for 2023, we're proposing to keep the same priority subwatersheds. This mainly comes into play with our larger projects where we offer additional funding, that 100% funding up to $100,000 for larger projects in those blue areas. And then we would look to add West Badness to that area when it's fully incorporated into Ramsey-Washington. Next, just wanted to put a blurb in here, but Michael McKinney from BAR is here, so he's going to talk more about the street sweeping assistance. But last year, the board voted to approve for BAR to move forward with the street sweeping study, and that's what we'll talk about next or shortly. And then as far as stewardship grant coverage, again, proposing to keep it all the same except the maintenance grant. If the board agrees, we would like to raise that to $1,500 per year. Most people don't ask for that much. We ask for bids from contractors so we can see what their estimate is. But some of our larger projects, especially a lot of shoreline restorations, we're seeing those costs come in a little bit higher. So that would help those people who bump up against that amount. And that's it. I don't know, Tina, if this is the time to take board action or if we should wait till after Michael's presentation. And of course, if anyone has questions.
We can take action on the one item and then talk about the other later, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. I was also going to say, if you wanted Michael to present now, you could do that as well. So that would be up to you.
I personally, I'd rather do the maintenance thing right now. I had a question on the maintenance. You said that we only inspect when we have a contract in place for maintaining a BMP.
So I might have said that wrong. So every stewardship grant project has a maintenance agreement they sign. So
Right.
they have a 5-year, residential projects have a 5-year maintenance agreement. Larger projects are 20 years. So all of those are subject to inspection. If they have a maintenance grant, we thought maybe that would be proof that we're take that off the list where we wouldn't have to inspect them because we knew a contractor was doing that, but that has not been the case. We've had to do a little bit of follow up on the contractors too. So we're still inspecting those, whether they have a maintenance grant and a contractor doing the maintenance or not.
I was just wondering if that would be, you know, because there are a lot of rain gardens around, I know that, and they're not necessarily in the system anymore, although we paid for them at some point, that maybe the CAC should think about taking a look at having some of the master water stewards or something, set up a thing to just go around and look at all of them that were there before to see, even though we don't have responsibility, it'd still be nice to know if they're flourishing or if they, because we actually have one in our neighborhood that's a little suspect in my mind, but.
Yeah, well, send me the location. Yeah, we have, that's been a brief idea that we've kind of thrown around as far as training water stewards or master gardeners. So yeah, I can definitely look back into that and see if it's something we can pursue.
See if that's a possibility.
Yeah.
And as far as raising the maintenance to $1,500 per year, do I have a motion on that? Or is,
I'll move it. I think that was a good idea.
okay,
Second.
any discussion? No, okay, roll call.
Say, Larry, does that motion include all of the action items, including the priority areas and the coverage amounts?
Yeah, I would say that everything except for the street sweeping, yes.
Yeah, okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So then Pam,
Aye.
Matt,
All right.
Diane,
I,
and Larry.
Aye,
and then I had just a couple things.
sure, go.
Paige, you said on the residential projects, keeping the maximum coverage amounts. I was curious how our amounts compare to the other districts.
Good. I think, you know, I guess I don't know. Some districts don't necessarily have maximums, but they look at, like, they have a calculator that they use, so they're not funding quite as much. Maybe they don't do as high of a percentage. But I think there are, you know, we're comparable to like Capital Region, I think in Rice Creek with the amount that we're offering to people.
Thanks.
Yeah,
May I ask you a question, Larry?
sure.
I was curious, besides the website, how would a constituent find out about the stewardship grant program? I know I've had some people from Obasso approach me about, like, hey, does the watershed offer any kind of money or anything else? And, you know, I led them to the website, but is there, I know the stewardship grant is for other people to leverage. Is there budget within the communication area to make sure the message gets out really clearly that this is available?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Lauren, our communication person, it does flat, like, I don't know the proper terms, but yeah, social media blasts about it. We try to get word out to our cities so that they can put it in their newsletters and different reports they send out. Yeah, it's hard. You know, word of mouth is a big thing. We have been better about signage. So Mary and Simba, when they do inspections, they put signs in the rain gardens or plantings so that when, you know, somebody walks by, they'll see what is going on. And then it has our website on there so they can give us a call or look that up. Yeah, if you have any other ideas, I'd be open to that too.
Oh, I was curious because when I was looking, I know the budget is what we allocate to service these grants. I was curious if where the line items were for helping support the grant program, and both publicity, signage would be the other question I had.
Yeah, that's all in communications.
That's all in communications. Okay, are those uniquely identified, Tina, out of curiosity, or is it just we just assume it's communications and it's?
I mean, it's part of Lauren's work program.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be line itemed out of her budget necessarily. It would be, you know, working with all of our program staff for program communications.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, it must be relatively easy to find because I found it. Go ahead, sorry.
I just want to interrupt with an unrelated item. Our treasurer is not here. There's checks to sign. They landed in front of me.
That's what I was told, is the backup.
Yep, you all are authorized to sign.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
Diane,
it could be anyone. Okay, I didn't know.
Let's do it, but sorry.
thank you.
Want to make sure folks get paid.
Mhm.
Okay, so that is item number 6. Item number 7, we have action items, a lot of them. Starting out with the 2023 CIP maintenance and repair project bid review and approval.
Yeah, Erin should have that for you here.
Should I share my screen and pull them up, or?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. Let's see. Okay. I'm used to Teams. This is
Mhm.
Zoom. Share screen. Okay, here we go. Okay, you guys all seeing this?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay. All right, so bids were opened yesterday morning at 10 a.m. and we got eight bidders, which is great. I'd like to see that many for competitive bids. And the lowest responsible bidder came in at $517,633.33. That's Miller Excavating Incorporated. That's not a group that I don't think has done a lot with Ramsey-Washington before, but we have had experience with them in the past with other clients, and did some good due diligence in getting some feedback on this company from references, and things look to be in order. So this is how the bids came in. Are there any questions?
Well, Dave, have you worked with Miller Excavating at all?
No, I have not. I've only worked with Fitzgerald before and New Look. Heard of urban companies, but a lot of these are newer companies as well. So, but we've checked them. I've checked a couple other people besides Bar, and everything I've heard has been positive and no concerns about our work and their ability to do it.
Good.
I can just add that they do a lot of work, Larry, out here by us. They're actually located in the town I live, Baytown, and they're really highly respected out here on the east side and do
Okay.
quite a few of the street projects. So just to let you know this is where they seem to locate, where their business is located, is right out here in Baytown.
Okay, great.
I'd
One
like
of the
to move
reference
to accept
checks.
the bids and award to the 2023 CIP Maintenance Repair Project to Miller Excavating, and direct staff to prepare and mail the notice of award, prepare the draft agreement, and review the required submittals.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second. Do we have further discussion? We do have a list of the projects that didn't make it. I have one question on that list before we go for a vote. In there, on the normalized score, some of the projects that made it into this made it in because it's part of the site scored higher than the threshold. What does that mean?
Dave, do you want to take that or do you want me to answer that?
You could fill them, but if they score higher than the threshold, that just means they score high enough to be maintenance of some kind that's in there, more or less. It's time to do something at them.
But
If
Dave,
they're under
the question was that it says part of the site scored higher than the threshold, and that bumped it up into the.
Oh, that'd be
list.
like if a smaller section of it, like the pavers, for example, at the PFS sites, maybe some years the pavers themselves need to be cleaned, but not the outlet or the rock filters need to get done. So then you can kind of parse it out, and the rock is going to grade out as okay, but the pavers themselves will need to go. So we'll leave the rock for 3 years, but the pavers will do every year to kind of stay on top of it.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have comments, questions?
Well, I have a couple of things, but they don't relate to the motion really, so we could do that after.
We can vote on the motion.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead. Okay, roll call.
Okay,
Anybody further discussion, make sure that everybody's happy.
Mhm.
Okay, roll call, thank you.
yeah, Pam,
Aye.
Matt,
All right.
Diane,
Aye.
and Larry.
Aye. Okay, Diane.
Okay, so,
I'll do the rest of them.
oh, sure. In item, can't hardly read it, 617C. Anyway, the one that Ramsey County is supposedly going to take care of on the inspection list. Why are they taking care of just those places we installed? Is my first question. And second, who's going to monitor that it gets done and when is it going to get done?
So this is the dual arch pipes under Grass Lake Trail east of overflow.
For
Yes,
example.
Okay. Well, I would expect that the reason it says Ramsey County is going to take responsibility is because it's technically their infrastructure, but I'll let others answer as well.
well, there's a lot of other infrastructure within their jurisdiction, so I'm wondering how this one got peeled out.
There is more under their jurisdiction. It's just not indicated on this spreadsheet because there wasn't maintenance recommended. I think, if Dave, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in that case, we had a site that was recommended for maintenance, but it was on Ramsey County part of their system. And so they said they would maintain it.
Right, there were a couple spots and they've actually done a few things pretty quick. So yeah, that's correct.
And Dave is the one who will be responsible for following up with them if they, I don't know, Dave, if you know the schedule for that particular site or if they've done that work yet, but.
One kind of south of Ramsey Road is completed. The pipe kind of work where we asked them to kind of clean out a little bit of sediment. That one was still in the works as of, I don't know, call it about 6 weeks ago. So I'll reach out to Gus.
Okay, I just would like to make sure that it gets done, given the history in the past. The other thing I wanted to ask about, I didn't realize this wasn't a complete list, but there were a couple of large corrugated metal pipes on the east side of Grass Lake that was actually the original drain. There was underwater when Rudd did their survey, so it didn't show up. And those are bent up now. So there's no drainage out of Grass Lake, which is why I assume that it's higher than normal because it's just been seeping during the drought. So water can't get under the sewer line to those arch pipes and the area that Barr had dredged out to lead to those arch pipes. So is anybody looking at those? We had met with Tina and Brandon about it back in, I think, May, maybe.
I do know that I was standing on that pipe when they were doing it, and I did call Parks about it to let them know that it's, hey, it's here, it's visible. We can look about it as far as if anything's being done, as far as scoped or telegraphed or cleaning out on either side, checking the overall pipe condition. I do not have a 100% answer with that. That would have to be, I think, Parks, unless we do it for them.
Well, since this area was flooded, and we had talked about paying particular attention to previously flooded areas, and it's not draining. I think it's important that we make it a priority that Grass Lake can drain.
I'm not sure that, is it accurate that Grass Lake isn't draining? I don't know. I don't think it's to the out, it wasn't.
It
to the
can't
outlet level.
get to the arch pipes because of the sewer line.
Oh, no, okay.
Please go under that.
Well, I can follow up with you. So that email that Brandon sent, like you said, when we met back in the spring, explained how the water gets to those. So we can look at that again. I'll follow up with you on that.
I think it'd be great. It's really, I mean, obviously it's snow now, but it's very easy to see because of the drought. So it's a really good time to take care of all these flow paths. And speaking of Grass Lake, I was going to bring it up later, but it fits. We still don't have a staff gauge there, right? And it's reading as the same elevation as West Vadnais, which it hasn't been connected to for a long time.
That's correct. We don't have a staff gauge on Grass Lake. So it's not, we're not reading Grass Lake's level. We're just reading West Vadnais's level at this point.
So, all right, is there any plan to change that next spring and get a real reading on Grass Lake? I know we can't do an automated one because there's no electricity, but we used to have a stick in wetland A. Then why can't we have one of those?
Ramsey County and Elrup now, they put one next to the I don't know, I'll call it the big large oak. There's a PK nail, and they always have one out there. So they should, or have historically have always had a staff gauge out there.
So we can have Ramsey County, we'll check with Ramsey County to put one in the season next spring.
And then have them give you the readings or something.
That's correct. Or I can run out there occasionally and spot to it. But yeah, yeah, Al is real good at sharing data.
Great, thank you.
Sounds good. Okay. Next item is the 2022 targeted retrofit projects, change order number 5.
Actually, Larry, can we go back and do the permit
Oh, yeah,
that was pulled, please?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for
Yeah.
reminding. Yep,
Yep.
okay. Permit. Thanks. We have to have that, don't we?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion? Do we want to have a discussion on the permit? No discussion? So do I
Diane,
have,
did you have a question? You're the one that pulled it from the,
Yeah, not right now, I can't remember why.
okay. Okay.
So go ahead.
blush? Okay. So then do I have a motion to approve permit number 22-37?
So moved. Second.
Second, any discussion on that? That gives us permission to do the CIP. Okay, no discussion, roll call.
Okay, Pam,
Aye.
Matt, Diane. Oh, and Larry.
Aye. Okay, thank you for reminding me.
Yeah.
I wrote it down, I just didn't look at it. Okay, so now we have the 2022 targeted retrofit project change order number 5.
Yeah, go for it, Erin.
So yes, I told you last month this was coming, and I tried to anticipate your questions. So we did include a memo in the board packet that walked you through sort of the changes in the project. As a reminder, this change order pertains to something a little different than the last one. The last change order had to do with some things that were needed in order to meet the St. Paul code, and as well as a change in some field conditions that really altered the excavation volume from the site. This last one is due to an error that Bar made on the bid form that we didn't find until well into the project. And we realized this was going on because at the time that the excavation volume, we realized that that was different than what we expected because of what was being pulled off site. We looked ahead to some of the next steps in the project and realized that there was a math error on some of the volumes. It was a unit conversion error that resulted in a pretty significant cost change to the contract price. This is the true amount that was needed for the project, but I'm sure this comes as a bit of a surprise. And so that's why we walked through or put a memo in to describe the change. What other questions can I answer for you?
I move we approve change order number 5.
I'll second. Okay, discussion. I have a discussion. So the change order number 5, with all the change orders we have, what's the price of this 34% above the bid?
Mhm.
Although I have to say it's only 7% over the high estimate from the engineer. We're pretty sure this isn't going to happen again.
Oh, no.
I don't want
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah, no, believe me, yes.
$500 million out.
Yeah, no, that's a reasonable question. No, at this point, Paige actually showed a photo of this project. It's essentially complete. And in fact, the pay app that you signed for this month is basically the full construction of the project. All that's left is some plantings. So no, I don't anticipate anything like this again. And actually, I will say, I mentioned this last month, and just acknowledging that there were some bumps in this project. We learned some things, and there are things we would do differently. And as just a show of good faith, Bar is going to be deducting $20,000 of our engineering on this project, just because of the inefficiencies that we felt happened in terms of creating change orders and all this extra work. So No, you're not going to be seeing another change order like this for this project.
And I've been on the board for like a zillion years, and this is like the first time I even recall this ever happening.
Well,
So I think we can,
I just. Yeah, it's,
I totally agree that we should approve the change order. I was a little surprised that Bar just offered to eat the part that went with the fees for doing the change order, not any of the principle of this.
Oh, what's our reasoning for that?
Yeah, it just.
Well, so here's what makes this
What
project
you
a little
kill
bit,
in my world,
oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, Diane.
I said you eat what you kill in my world, and I just wondered why you didn't offer a little more since it was Bar's mistake.
Oh, you're wondering why we didn't offer more?
Yeah, it was just you offered the fees to prepare and execute the change orders.
Yeah. Well, typically, and I appreciate that question. I mean, typically, you know, we don't pay for a change in construction cost if the construction cost was needed to actually, if that represented the true cost of the project. However, I think we will own the fact that we should have headed off the St. Paul review before. So there was no great reason that the watershed district should have to pay for basically two different designs, one before we caught the St. Paul review change requirements and then one after. So that seemed reasonable that we should deduct that cost, and the watershed district shouldn't pay the cost of us preparing the change orders. And you know, and the memos to describe them to you. So we've deducted the cost of creating the change orders and any of the inefficiencies in the design changes, so that basically now what you've paid for is the design that was ultimately acceptable by the city of St. Paul to go into the site and what was needed based on the field requirements. So that's how we made the distinction between what Bar should pay for and what we shouldn't. But I'm certainly willing to discuss that more if there's more questions about that.
okay.
Does that answer your question, Diane?
Yes,
I can't see your expression. You're far away from me.
it answers the question.
Okay.
We'll
Doesn't
leave it at that.
It doesn't resolve the issue, but yeah, okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second and roll call.
Pam, Matt,
All right.
Diane,
Hey,
and Larry.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Hopefully that will be one, I will see that project except for it being completed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Thanks for your consideration and understanding.
Item number 7C is the 2023 budget and levy final approval.
Yeah, so I didn't prepare any presentation. Certainly happy to answer any questions, get a sense for if you're comfortable with the final numbers that I came up with. I did highlight on the table the items that were changed. As I mentioned in the memo or in the cover sheet, in the general fund, those items were bumped up because of a need for more funds in those after further consideration. And then in the capital improvements budgets, those were to reflect more accurately the carryover that we're anticipating at the end of this year in a few weeks. And that did leave us with a 5.22% increase in levy for 2023.
is that change in budget or change in levy?
That's the change in levy.
Oh, yeah, okay.
and I wanted to confirm, Tina, the change in budget was 353,000.
The total budget went up 5.63%, and that's a total of 807,000. And that's on that little table at the bottom of the big table.
I need to put on special glasses just to see it.
Yeah, the change in levy was 353,000.
Got it. Well, I got it. I've got it.
Oh, that's
Enlarged to
very
150
So,
special
the
glasses.
change in levy is what hits the pocketbook.
Right.
Yeah, so what goes to the county for levy approval is the 7,116,500.
Right.
Right.
So I compared the budget status report and this, which was a little difficult because it's organized a little differently. And it looked to me like there were some other areas that could have gone down a bit more and make up that difference pretty easy to get us to a 0% budget. And that included administration, the permit inspection and enforcement, GIS maintenance, the attorney fees, the outside program support, research projects, targeted retrofit projects, and stewardship fund, grant fund. And I know that 5% is a lot less than everybody, all the other jurisdictions are asking for. And I would ask for 15% if I thought we needed it, but looks to me like we could have a levy at 0 and still have plenty of room in our budget for all anticipated costs and emergencies and everything.
So I'd have to look at each of those general fund items that you mentioned. In the capital improvement funds, I'm not sure that, I think I've more accurately looked at what we'll have for carryover, and that can't necessarily be seen from the budget status report because of like things that you've already approved that I know are still coming to be paid.
Yeah, I know, especially in areas like salaries, and a lot of these areas, we don't really get all the bills till December or January. So I tried to take that into account into looking at this. And of course, you know the detail better, but it is a small amount of dollars. So I just wondered if we could get down to 0.
I certainly, I could spend more time. It's hard for me to speak off the top of my head on each of those line items, but if you want to walk through them, we can and discuss. I think, sometimes year to year, we might not spend a lot, but I do look back over a 5-year period to make, to see kind of our trends in spending in each of those line items. To make sure that it wasn't low or high, in a particular year for a particular reason. But I guess the direction I got at the September meeting was to get, as close to 5 or less as I could. And so I wasn't shooting for 0 in those cases, but I can certainly, this is our last meeting, so it has to, our budget and levy has to be certified tonight, but if the direction is to get to 0, then I can take those items into consideration and get it to 0. And you would just be approving the levy amount the same as last year.
I personally, I don't mind going up 5%. Track other organizations where there's a lot of 4s around, but there's also a lot of 8s and 9s. And thanks to the people who live in St. Paul, 15%. It seems to me that we want to keep our coffers full so that we have money to do something. And I guess you cut a little bit here and a little bit there, but what happens if we come up short and we need more money? If we have a big project, I don't think 5.22 is going to raise anybody's issues around the area, but.
And I know we need to go ahead. I just don't see the 350,000 as very much. And I think having been treasurer for a couple of years and worked on this over the last 5 years, though it could have gotten to 0. I thought the board's direction was not to go over 5, and I agreed with that. We didn't have a motion for 5%. I know we're going to go ahead. I just think we could have gotten it to 0.
Fair comment. And any other discussion? And you usually have So,
I see both ways. Yeah, I don't feel strongly either way. I might propose that we ask Tina to go down to 3% and make a compromise and call it a day.
well,
But I also don't have a problem with the 5% because it's not a lot of money and we're doing good things with the money. It's not like we won't continue to do good things.
And we've gotten it, I think, every year, a little more fine tuned. I would like to make a record of the credit I give you, Tina, for that. I'm working with the board on that.
So did I hear just Diane just say that she's actually okay with the 5%?
Yep.
Okay, I move that we approve the proposed fiscal year 2023 general fund and CIB budgets and adopt resolution 2202.
any further discussion? Val, do you have any comments?
No more comments. I understand Diane's point where I was going back and forth and weighing in my head was it feels like we're going to be a bit more ambitious next year in terms of looking at the potentially things like street sweeping and maybe watershed definition adjustments, which might lead to something else. So I'm a little torn. It seems like a marginal increase that could be put to use really well. So that's at least how I felt comfortable with it back in September, and I still do now.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Thank you. Roll call.
Okay, Pam,
Aye.
Matt, Diane,
I,
and Larry.
Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Attorney report.
Thank
Are
you.
you feeling better this
I
session?
have a voice, it's back. So, this month we did some publications for some things that needed public notice. We've looked at some issues regarding recording or some other kinds of processes that we'll be talking to Tina about. And something I just really want to point out, and Diane, you know this in our business, it was really nice for me. I had a nice conversation with Aaron and Bar coming forward on what happened at that last project. And as Pam echoed, it's very rare, but it was nice as the attorney for the district that I could talk to Aaron, understand the issues that happened and the ability for Bar to come forward and say, we're sorry, here's how we think we'll make this fair. And we did discuss the fact that really no added fees were given to the district based on that. And so I just want to comment as an attorney, it's always refreshing where it's going to say we're just upfront about what happened and that we move forward. And I was given that ability to do that with Aaron contacting me and us discussing it. And so I just want to thank Aaron for that. And I really do appreciate the board understanding that too. And from the legal position, I really do feel like Bar handled it very well. I want to thank them for that. Otherwise, other things were just uneventful.
Tracy, you were also gonna look at the bid documents, right? For trying to catch that kind of stuff, especially with St. Paul's special rules.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the bid documents themselves are really pretty favorable for those engineers. They provide it for us, but we will look at it too. I've got with Miller coming on with somebody we haven't contracted for, I'm going to be interested to see exactly what we're looking at with this new bid coming in that you just approved this month. So we'll keep an eye on those as well.
I had an unrelated question. Have you heard anything about the legislature working on the hybrid meetings or anything like that? And maybe Tina knows something came up at Maud. I think they're going to talk about it, but.
I will admit that Lauren is my specialist on that. I always say, Lauren, what's new on this? And of course, she's going into maternity leave, but I'm going to make her keep up on this. I'm sure that baby will sleep once in a while, though. So I'm sorry, I personally don't have anything to add on that. And I don't know if Tina heard anything at Maud either.
Yeah, so there was a resolution that went before the body at the MOD annual meeting, and it failed. Failed to move forward.
What was the reason for it failing?
Well, there was kind of two groups. So there was the Metro who was in favor, and the greater Minnesota watersheds who were not. And what they just said, it was really difficult to hold meetings virtually for their board members. And they were worried that if this flexibility, even though it's just for flexibility, they were worried that it would pressure them to have to do them instead of just allowing it to be done, even though we talked about, being able to, write your own rules essentially for your watershed if you wanted to be more stringent than the state law. So there was that concern. Here, the thing is that there actually already was a resolution on the books that still stands from MOD that limits the number of virtual meetings to 3 per year. And this resolution was going to take that number away and just say limited. So there is still a resolution that MOD supported from last year. But there is also a sense that it's probably not the watersheds that are going to change this law, that the cities and the counties would have to be behind that as well. And so that was one of the direction, was to, work with the Association of Cities and Counties to see kind of what direction their contingency is interested in.
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that, given the travel that some of those.
I know, those
I know.
four they like.
have to do. Is it because they lack the technology, or they just didn't understand that would be like the floor, the bottom requirement, that they could have a stricter rule?
There was concern about lack of technology opportunities for some of the rural areas. They did talk about, being able to, like you said, some of those districts are so large, they travel 2 hours to get to a meeting. So you would think it would be helpful, but there was concern also that that board members could be anywhere, right? And so they wouldn't necessarily be tied to their watershed district, because they could be in Florida the whole time and not maybe have a permanent address in Minnesota, but not necessarily be in the best interest of the watershed if they weren't there.
That's BS.
I know. It was a real stark difference, and two kind of opposing viewpoints on the issue. And we talked about it in the administrators meeting too, and it that same line was drawn. So it wasn't just with the managers. So even though my point of view was this just allows for flexibility, like not, that still wasn't a resounding supportive discussion.
Well, I'm glad we have it. Val's able to join us. Pam did last time.
Yes, so they can't
It's
vote.
just really efficient and.
Yeah.
inclusive.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it should be legal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Yeah, and what we're doing is legal. It's the it's the board
It's the
members
voting.
being able to be,
Well, and I guess we can, if we know in advance, still vote, as long as what we posted a week in advance or something.
yeah, 3 days. Yeah.
It's very hard to find a public place where you have COVID to go and post before.
Oh, that's right. There's that weird thing where you have to be in a public place.
Well, you
Right.
have to have a place open to the public. So it could be your house. You would just have to list your address of your home and allow the public to attend if they would like to.
I'll come into my COVID cove.
Right.
But Diane, we are keeping an eye on it, so we'll do our best to, if anything changes, to let everybody know.
Thanks.
Yeah. All righty, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Board issues, policies, and operation for discussion at the meeting. Anybody have anything that I didn't include a topic in here because nobody gave me one? No. Let's see that the edible It was on our list at the end.
I wanted to add one thing, and I didn't bring it up during Paige's presentation because I didn't think we needed to change anything right now. But I was interested that Ramsey County has a different definition of the equity or underserved areas. And I'd like to put that on our log to take a look at sometime, what the differences are, and if we should conform more to theirs or just keep ours separate, because we've got good reasons to. And it's been a little while since we defined ours. So sometime in 23, maybe we could just review that again and see what they're up to and if anything's changed.
Yeah, for sure. That actually came up in our staff meeting about this. So yeah, I will definitely look at that.
Yep, and I'll add it to the list. It's a good idea.
What about performance review?
Oh, I was gonna bring that up again, managers at the end. I can't
Okay,
do
that's fine. Okay, anybody else? In that case, we move to item number 10, which is street sweeping.
Yes, Michael is here.
Hi, Michael.
Hi, Michael.
How's it going? I'm probably a new face to a lot of people on the call here, so I'll just introduce myself quickly. My name is Michael McKinney. I'm from Bar Engineering. And Aaron, myself, and Paige have been working on a study for the past several months related to prioritization of street sweeping throughout the district. With the sort of targeted focus being on, is this something we should consider supporting through the stewardship grant program moving into 2023 and onwards. So I am going to also figure out how to share screens here. Let's see if this works. Share. So yeah, today I'll be presenting on outcomes, results of that prioritization study, and just some of our thoughts on how this may be something we may want to support kind of going into the future via the stewardship grant program here. So impetus for the study, this is an area of very active research right now. It's definitely a hot topic amongst a lot of watershed districts and municipalities. And there was also a lot of interest from municipal partners here within the district in terms of trying to figure out, are we doing enough street sweeping? Should we be doing more? Can we get support to do more? So the opportunity here is, of course, the stewardship grant program that we've been moving forward over the last several years. There may be opportunities to support street sweeping efforts via the stewardship grant program. So that was sort of the opportunity for looking into this a little bit more closely and trying to do some of this upfront study. Before I move off this slide, I just kind of wanted to point out this cool series of images at the bottom here. You know, I think a lot of times the focus is really on fall leaf drop when we're talking about street sweeping, but there is, you know, seed drop and pollen drop that occurs in the spring, you know, grass clippings in the summer. Another image you could throw on here would be, you know, a big mound of ice and snow in the curb filled with leaf matter, and it's all going to be ready and bioavailable once again once snow melt occurs in the spring. So again, just a kind of cool series of figures there. So project outline here. So our first step was to perform a survey of all of the municipal partners, because one of our initial goals was to do a evaluation of existing street sweeping operations throughout the district to kind of get a baseline for where we're at in terms of how much removal are we getting via the existing street sweeping that's going on throughout the district, and is there room to improve those programs. After doing that existing conditions analysis, we then developed a prioritization strategy. So basically, we kind of took all of this information. We looked for areas where we get you could kind of say the most bang for your buck for doing street sweeping throughout the entire district, and tried to highlight those areas as they relate to district managed water bodies and other district goals. And then lastly, kind of took all that information and developed some, you know, potential recommendations for the stewardship grant program going forward here. So street sweeping survey, we sent out a survey to 10 member cities, 9 of which responded. And the goal, a major goal of this survey was to just figure out what are people doing right now and what are our municipal partners doing. for street sweeping. How often are they street sweeping? What types of sweepers are they using? And I think also really importantly, what are the sort of barriers and challenges to completing more street sweeping in a given year? So I've got, just a basic list of some of the answers that we heard from that survey. The entire list of survey responses is included in the memorandum that was, I believe, included in the board packet that was provided about a week ago here. But the goals of sweeping are listed here. Again, pollutant reduction is right at the top of people's minds. Trash removal, public safety, trash control. There's a lot of reasons to do street sweeping that are not just related to pollutant reduction. Barriers and challenges, typical challenges that we hear a lot on staffing issues, not having enough individuals to actually go out and do the sweeping. Vehicle acquisition, that's a major expense if the cities are doing the sweeping themselves. Also some other maybe less obvious challenges, like, for example, disposal sites. There's, some, depending on where you're at in the district, getting to the disposal site can be quite a bit of travel. Obviously, there's costs associated with disposal. There's costs associated with screening your materials, weighing your materials, and lots of costs that occur just from getting things from the truck to a disposal site. And some other concerns, just logistics of dealing with on-street parking and things like that. So another part of this study was focused on developing sort of more general recommendations to provide back to member cities in terms of here's some general program improvements that you may want to consider based on existing street sweeping operations and what we heard from other municipal partners. An important question that, of course, we asked is, what type of grant support would be most useful, or how would you use grant funding support? And for the most part, those answers were targeted right back at the barriers and challenges that were cited by cities. So maybe a city would try and acquire a new piece of equipment, or more staff, or offset screening costs to actually do more sweeping in a given year. This is a summary table of these survey responses. I won't go into all the details here, but basically way at the right is the number of sweepings that our municipal partners are doing in a given season. And you can see it's widely variable. Some cities are doing as many as 7, North St. Paul, for example. And other cities are doing a little bit less. St. Paul, for example, for most residential areas is doing 2 times a year. Woodbury as well, prior to grant support that was provided this year, was doing 2 sweeps, 1 in the spring, 1 in the fall. So on average, cities were doing about 4 sweepings per year. So I won't get into too many of the details here, but to actually evaluate existing conditions, we did a modeling analysis using a bar developed model. The inputs for this model are things like watershed imperviousness, canopy cover, road surfaces, and of course, seasonal street sweeping frequency. Just to show what that data looks like, just kind of interest is this is the canopy cover that is overhanging road surfaces throughout the entire watershed district. Is what's being shown on the left here. So you can see green means there's a lot of canopy cover, white means there's no canopy cover, and that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no canopy, there's no trees in those areas. It means that there's just no canopy cover that is overhanging a street. So there might be a lot of trees, but no streets, or there might be a highway system that, of course, you don't see tree canopy along, county roads and interstates and things like that. So. And the image on the right here, that just shows a kind of zoom in showing the canopy cover and the road overhang. So definitely interesting to see the data in that way and see where these sort of hotspots of canopy cover are throughout the district. The only sort of jargon that I'll talk about just for a moment tonight is this whole concept of recovery versus reduction. I only need to cover this because this does relate to some of the prioritization strategies that we developed. So the term recovery, when I say recovery, what we're referring to is the amount of total phosphorus that's actually recovered in the truck. So if you get a pound of swept material removed and that is in the truck, that is a pound recovered. Reduction, on the other hand, is the total phosphorus that you've prevented from reaching a downstream water body by recovering that 1 pound of total phosphorus. And those numbers are not always the same. So if you perform street sweeping in an area that is immediately proximal to a district managed water body, in that case, recovery might be exactly equal to reduction, because whatever you have recovered from the street would have made it directly to that downstream district managed water body. But you can imagine there's other situations. For example, if you do street sweeping in an area where there's 4 intermediate BMPs before that runoff would actually reach a district managed water body, street sweeping is important to protect those BMPs. But if you hadn't have done street sweeping, those BMPs would have removed that total phosphorus anyways. So the concept of recovery versus reduction is kind of just how much is actually prevented from getting to a downstream water body. And we used the district's PA models to evaluate that. So just to give you a quick example of what those sort of results look like, this is again just the existing conditions results. These are the results broken out by major watershed. And I realize the numbers here are probably a little too small to be able to read on these small screens here, but for every major watershed, we've broken out, this is the total phosphorus loading in that watershed. Here's the amount recovered via street sweeping. Here's the amount reduced to downstream water bodies via street sweeping. And I just wanted to point out that, this table shows those results per major watershed, but we calculate these results at a scale of about 500 by 500 foot grid. So we can recalculate these results based on any grouping of information. So another table that's of course of a lot of interest is showing this data by municipality. And you could, theoretically break this data out in any way you wanted, but we typically were focused on major watersheds and municipal results throughout this study. So with the existing conditions analyzed and modeled, the next steps were to develop our sort of prioritization strategy. So the basic steps are outlined here. Step 1 was to come up with a baseline sweeping recommendation, and I'll talk about more what that means here on the following slide. Step 2 was to develop prioritization strategies. So how do we figure out where those hot spots of areas to sweep are throughout the district? And finally, develop strategies to incorporate this into the stewardship grant program, or to figure out if this is something that we should be incorporating into the stewardship grant program. So what's the purpose of a quote unquote baseline recommendation? Well, this baseline recommendation, I think first and foremost, could potentially serve as a default recommendation to member cities. So if a member city approaches the district and says, how often should I be sweeping? We have a result to point to. We can say, this is what we would recommend compared to what you're doing in your existing condition. Another point of developing this baseline strategy is it allowed us to do a consistent model run across the entire watershed district. So we have a kind of apples to apples condition for doing our prioritization analysis. The baseline recommendation, it's informed in part by the optimal number of sweepings per season. And to determine that, we did a sort of cost benefit analysis where we basically looked at what's the incremental cost of doing another sweep per season, and what's the incremental additional total phosphorus recovered by doing that additional sweep. And as you can imagine, when you combine those things, you can make these cost curves and figure out, what the optimum number of sweeps per season is. So all of that analysis kind of went into developing a baseline recommendation. And so, I think an important note here is the baseline recommendation that we developed is shown here. So you can see the baseline recommendation we have developed to this point is 1 spring sweeping, 1 summer sweeping, and 2 to 3 fall sweepings. The reason that this was chosen as a sort of baseline recommendation is threefold. 1, it's informed by the cost benefit analysis, of course, that I was just referring to. 2, it's based on the fall just having a higher cost efficiency for removal of total phosphorus than other seasons. And that is because, yes, there's more recoverable total phosphorus and other pollutants on the streets in the fall when we get that big leaf drop. And lastly, it was also based on the results of that survey that was provided to member cities. We didn't want to come back with a recommendation to member cities of you should be sweeping 9 times a year, or you should be sweeping 12 times a year. Because what we heard in that survey is that's not going to be an attainable number of sweepings per year, just based on the fact that the majority of the cities are doing more like 4 sweepings per year. So we wanted to make sure it was still an attainable goal, but not so many sweepings in a year that it would be considered non-attainable by a member city. So after sort of developing that initial baseline recommendation, our next steps were to kind of go and develop this prioritization strategy. So we developed 3 separate prioritization strategies, one based on just raw total recovery, so how much total phosphorus actually was removed in the trucks, one based on total reduction to district managed water bodies. So that's again getting at that concept of recovery versus reduction. And lastly, we did a separate prioritization based on reduction specifically within impaired and at-risk district managed water bodies as developed or as defined by district goals. So a question that came up, I believe, at a previous board meeting was, is the pond prioritization study incorporated into this study? The answer there is a little unsatisfying, maybe yes and no is the best way I can answer that. So the recovery strategy, so that's that option number 1 there. Because we're talking about just the raw recovery of total phosphorus throughout the entire district, we're basically, by that strategy, prioritizing reduction to any downstream BMP, whether it's a district managed water body or one of these intermediate rain gardens or ponds that ultimately drain to a district managed water body. So the recovery piece definitely gets at and is associated to that previous pond performance study. One reason that we didn't take this any further in this particular study is that pond prioritization study is not static. You can imagine, there might be a pond that is really high on the ranking list as of now, based on existing conditions and based on the fact that maybe it needs sediment management, it needs a dredging project to occur. But potentially after that dredging project occurs, all of a sudden that pond is no longer as high of a priority as it was before. So for that reason, it's a little hard to have a separate prioritization when your pond performance prioritization is a little bit of a moving target over the years. So one reason that it wasn't directly incorporated into this study. And I just want to point out that, as I discussed earlier, the way the data is broken out, if there is a specific water body of interest or a BMP of interest, to say, gosh, this was the highest priority pond in that entire study, you could definitely take the results from this study and develop a street sweeping prioritization plan specifically for that BMP and the drainage area to that BMP. So there is ways to consider it. It's kind of indirectly considered, but it's not super directly considered as a prioritization strategy in this particular study. So just to kind of show what those prioritization results look like. This figure here shows the actual raw recovery ranking values. So this is the raw total phosphorus recovery values throughout the entire district, where red indicates highest priority, i.e. these are areas where there's a ton of canopy cover, there's a lot of street density. And then green would be the areas where there's the lowest street sweeping priority. And just to kind of show you what those results look like blown up to a larger scale, these are those 500 by 500 foot grids that I was referring to earlier throughout the district that we use as our sort of calculation scale for the study. You can see here the yellow that indicates a road that kind of has maybe medium canopy cover. Green areas sometimes represent areas that just don't have roads. So if there's not a road in that cell, there's 0 street sweeping priority assigned to that cell. And then lastly, on the right there's the area that has very, very high canopy cover, very, very high road density. Just to overlay some of those other data sets, you can kind of see the amount of canopy cover and road density we're talking about in these different cells. And as I'm sure you're all aware, as you're driving around the district, you definitely go down residential roads that look like these areas on the right here, where it's a ton of canopy cover, lots of road density, really no intermediate BMPs. So again, we've talked about this a little bit, so I'll kind of skip over this slide. Just wanted to demonstrate that we've calculated these results in different scales. You can imagine a municipality is not going to find this level of resolution very useful, because a municipality is not going to change their street sweeping operation every 500 feet. You know, they need larger scales to do their prioritizations on. So one thing that we did was we recalculated the prioritization strategy based on quarter sections across the district, which maybe is more equivalent to a street sweeping zone that a municipality would use to track street sweeping progress. And just wanted to point out that, you know, we can also calculate the street sweeping prioritization areas per municipality. So, you know, this is showing the prioritization across the entire district, whereas the image on the right here is showing the prioritization specifically for the city of Woodbury. So lots of different ways you can kind of cut up the data and make different conclusions. So in terms of kind of shifting gears here, so that's kind of the background of the prioritization study and the modeling analysis that was done. Moving into thinking about how this all ties into the stewardship grant program. I wanted to highlight, I think as we're all aware here, there was funding that was provided to the city of Woodbury to do enhanced street sweeping just this year while the study was actually occurring. And this was one of those things that it was just a good opportunity. Woodbury was already working with South Washington to do a larger scale, more enhanced street sweeping operation for the fall season. They reached out to Ramsey-Washington to say, hey, could we get support for continuing this higher degree of sweeping throughout the Ramsey-Washington portion of the city of Woodbury? And we performed a cost benefit analysis and said, yeah, that probably makes a lot of sense to support in terms of the amount of money we're spending per total pound of total phosphorus removed. And we have received information from the city of Woodbury they basically sent us their records for the street sweeping operations that were performed just this year. I won't go over all of these numbers here, but basically there was 80 tons of compostable material that was removed. Using MPCA tools and calculators, we estimate that that's about 72 pounds of phosphorus removed. And anybody who thinks in this world of pounds of phosphorus removed in BMPs, that's a lot of pounds of phosphorus for sure. The amount of grant funding that Ramsey-Washington provided to support that effort was $50,000. So if you compare that 72.31 pounds to $50,000, that comes out to right about $700 per pound of total phosphorus removed. That's to be perfectly blunt, that's a very, very cost efficient use of funds to support total phosphorus reduction. When I'm thinking about a super efficient rain garden design that's in a really easy implementation area, if I see a number from $1,500 to $2,500 per pound of phosphorus removed, I think that's a fantastic number. So seeing a number below 1,000, that's a very compelling number, and those sorts of numbers are supported by other street sweeping studies that have been done. This is not unique to this particular study. It does seem to be a highly cost efficient BMP in terms of pounds recovered per cost spent on street sweeping operations. So and just another point here, this might be important for later discussions in this presentation, that came out to be about $150 per lane mile is what the district supplied to the city of Woodbury to perform this operation. So that's, the kind of benchmark for thinking about how to figure out what sort of funding support may be supplied to other cities for future street sweeping efforts. So 2023 and onward. Some of the key elements that are sort of, requiring board input and feedback on going into 2023, and maybe even more so going into future years where there might be a more of an opportunity to adjust the stewardship grant program total budget are listed here. So first and foremost is that baseline recommendation. That's one that we would definitely be looking for board input on. And I've got slides for each one of these with some suggested approaches and some things for consideration for the board and district staff. So Number two would be implementation strategy of how we actually advertise this sort of grant funding to member cities. And then lastly would be stewardship grant program funding. So this kind of gets related to years beyond 2023. If we're going into 2024 and figuring out, should there be a budget adjustment to the stewardship grant program to support more sweeping? So those are the kind of big things that we're thinking about as we are sort of leaving 2022 and going into 2023 and beyond. So again, first key element here that it would be requiring board feedback would be this baseline recommendation. Some of the suggested approaches here that we've developed as part of this study is, again, kind of as I previously mentioned, is to use this baseline recommendation as a default recommendation to member cities. So if a member city is asking how much sweeping we should be doing, this would be a number that can be provided in terms of sweepings per season. Another way this baseline recommendation could be used could be as a criteria for evaluating whether or not Ramsey-Washington would support a grant request. So for example, you could say, okay, does if a city came with an enhanced street sweeping program that fell short of that baseline recommendation, maybe that wouldn't rank as highly as another member city's application that came in where they said we're going to meet or exceed Ramsey-Washington's baseline recommendation. So some different ways in which that might be considered. And Paige, I think as we're going through here, I don't know if it's best to open things up to discussion per point, or if I should just go through all of these and we can open this up to discussion afterwards. I was planning on just plowing through and we can have a discussion afterwards, but whatever works best is totally fine with me. So
yeah, I think plow through unless the board wants to jump in, of course.
Awesome.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
So when I was just doing some rough math, and correct me if I'm mistaken, that's like, so 5 out of the 9 cities surveyed sweep under the baseline recommendation to date. Have you reached out to some of those cities to see, if that's even palpable or something they'd be interested in seeing as a baseline?
I think that's definitely a next step here. And so on this next slide, we're going to be talking about some strategies for how to implement, if we are going to include street sweeping in our 2023 stewardship grant program efforts, some different approaches for reaching out to member cities. And that's definitely the first ask, is if we're reaching out to one of these cities who's currently well short of that baseline recommendation, if we're doing a more targeted approach of actually reaching out to those cities actively, as opposed to just sort of making this a advertised grant program, our first questions to them will be, here's this baseline recommendation. Is this something that is doable based on your current equipment? An approach that the city of Woodbury used, because Woodbury was only doing 2 sweepings per year, is they contracted street sweeping for to do this enhanced sweeping for the fall. And that is an option that member cities have. Contracting is based on a couple EOR studies that have been done, is potentially a little bit less cost efficient, especially the more sweepings you do per year, the more efficient it is for you to own your own equipment and for you to do the sweeping yourself. But with that said, contracting is another great option if that's just not feasible for a city. And contracting costs are still going to produce, highly compelling numbers in terms of dollars spent per pound of phosphorus removed. So doesn't move the needle in a huge way on those sorts of calculations.
I have a question to Michael before you move on.
Yeah.
So I remember like 25 years ago when I was on the Environmental Management Commission in Oakdale, where we were doing this kind of research and making recommendations to the council to buy street sweepers, that it really mattered what kind of street sweeper you had. And I mean, it's been 25 years now. I imagine technology's changed, but remember there's something to be the one that had water and one that did sucking, and they're not all the same. And did you consider that what street sweeper you have matters too?
Yeah,
so
that's
still does matter.
That's a really good question, and that's so we actually presented a version of this presentation at MOD without all of the board recommendations included, just sort of a high level overview of the study. And that question also came up at MOD, and yes, that was definitely, especially early on in this project, a really big focus. Is it typically if I went back to that survey slide, you'll see that we actually asked the cities what types of sweepers they're running. And the big difference is usually between mechanical and regenerative air. So mechanical, this is just a typical broom sweeper that just utilizes the mechanical force of the broom to actually scoop information or scoop leaf litter and recover it in that way. Whereas regenerative air, sometimes called vacuum sweepers, those actually have, as you mentioned, sort of a vacuum that is pulling off additional, potentially more smaller and finer particles. Because if you ever drive behind one of those mechanical sweepers, there is a cloud of dust that is sort of knocked up behind those. And that's a lot less apparent when you're behind one of those regenerative air sweepers. Again, I think I mentioned at the beginning of this is an area of very active study. There's definitely some studies that say there's absolutely a difference between regenerative air and mechanical sweepers. Most recent study that was sort of a statewide study done by the University of Minnesota found that there was no statistical difference in the total phosphorus recovery from running mechanical versus running regenerative air sweepers. And that's the MPCA moving forward with their calculators does not require any specification of sweeper type based on the findings of that study. And I think the argument there is, although these regenerative air sweepers are better at removing fine particles, they might be a little bit worse at removing wet material. So a lot of times when you're actually doing these street sweeping efforts, the timing's not ideal. The material in the street might be kind of wet. And it's a little bit harder for those regenerative air sweepers to do a good job in those sort of circumstances, which is why best possible recommendation is to run a mechanical sweeper followed by a regenerative air sweeper. And some cities do that. It's sort of called tandem sweeping. But that's obviously a high bar to cross because that requires 2 operators to be out rather than 1 and requires you to have that sweeping equipment in place. So long answer to a short question, but jury's a little bit out in terms of the research, but our best available information for the state of Minnesota would suggest that there's maybe not a huge difference in sweeper types. So that wasn't directly considered in this study.
Thank you. And that did remind me, and it was exactly that the studies back then, 25 years ago, showed that the mechanical sweeper followed by the picking up the fine particulates really did a substantially better job than either one alone. And I'm going to guess that still holds true. So it's something we might consider as including in a BMP is if you can, this is better than either one alone, right?
100%. Yeah, I think that's very well said. And as part of the memo, we did have a very short section at the end of that memo that will be provided to the member cities, just general recommendations. And that is one of them, is that sort of tandem sweeping does provide the highest degree of removal, and that's great from the perspective of total phosphorus recovery, but that's also great in terms of maintaining clean streets, and that's another goal of these municipalities is there, the aesthetics are important, the trash removal is important. From a road maintenance standpoint, getting that material removed off the street is beneficial, and from a safety standpoint. So there's a lot of reasons to do it, even beyond just the cost justification of the pollutant removal.
So you're going to get the information to the cities, and it's going to include your study results, right, for their city. And the recommendations for the number of street sweepings. Are you also going to include what RWMWD managed impaired water bodies are within their city to show the difference it might make?
I think that's a really good recommendation. We're so the memo that has been provided to this point is sort of we're kind of considering a draft memo for board review. So we're not maybe quite at that sort of final deliverable yet. One of the things that we have considered incorporating is actually a map book that would show the street sweeping prioritization areas ranked per city. And that potentially could be useful for cities to be able to see where those high priority areas are. And one of those sets of figures would actually show the prioritization just within areas that are within impaired and at-risk water bodies. So for some cities that wouldn't be applicable if there are no at-risk or impaired water bodies within their municipal boundary. But for others, it might be a majority of their city or half of their city is within one of those watersheds. So that is something that Paige and I have talked about in terms of a deliverable here. What would honestly be most useful for the member cities is if they, some cities will actually have what are called, some refer to them as street sweeping zones. We did a study for the city of Richfield where they use these zones to manage their operations. So they say we do zone A in week 1, we do zone B in week 2, et cetera, et cetera. So you can imagine that having the prioritization by those zones is probably the most useful thing that a municipality could get out of this, because that's going to match how operationally it makes sense to do the street sweeping, and it will show which areas you know, if their goal is to do 2 to 3 sweepings a year, sometimes you're just limited by, you had bad luck, the snow fell, and you just missed an opportunity to do 3 sweepings in the fall. But a recommendation might be, make sure if you're going to do 3 anywhere, do them in these higher priority zones within your municipality. But those are data sets that we asked for as part of the study, and we did not receive very much information on those street sweeping zones. So that potentially could be a recommendation to member cities is if there's not sort of operational zones that have been developed to help track sweeping, that could be a recommendation, because there's certainly value in being able to segment out your city and make sure those operations actually get done in a somewhat regimented way.
And thanks for that. I do think it's really important to include some kind of basic tutorial on why this is important for water quality, why it's not just about aesthetics. And that's important because of the process we just went through. The cities are setting their levies, they're setting their budgets, and they've had a budget for street sweeping. So for the cities that aren't doing it up to our recommendations, they need to be given important reasons for setting aside or raising their budget or reprioritizing or whatever. So I'd like to see that emphasis on the water quality and education included in it, and hopefully that will help them with their decisions.
I totally agree. I think that's of maybe utmost important with doing these street sweeping operations, and that's definitely right at the forefront of this memo. And presenting these results is often presented in the context of cost efficiency of your water quality benefit you're getting per dollar spent. And from that perspective, street sweeping is a pretty compelling BMP. Very different than structural BMPs that are out there in the watershed at all times. In some ways, I almost think of street sweeping almost as a pre-treatment BMP, because in some ways you're sort of removing material before it gets to those downstream BMPs. And there's a lot of benefit in doing that, especially if you're in an area where there are no downstream BMPs and you're just going straight to Battle Creek Lake, or you're going straight to the Beltline, which goes down to directly to the river. So
2 other quick things from me. Don't use things like BMP. Use plain English in your memos to the cities, please. And the other thing is, with all of this research you've done now, was there another phase that you would recommend doing in the future, further study, or is this pretty much covering everything?
I think this study does a good job of accomplishing our goals and figuring out where this high priority street sweeping areas are. I think it does a good job of outlining what that sort of baseline recommendation is. In terms of potential future studies and follow-up, I think there could be something where if this stewardship grant program is enacted and we get all of the cities up to this sort of baseline recommendation, there could be some additional analysis to say, is it worth even going beyond our current baseline recommendation to get even more benefit? And at what point do we hit that point of diminishing returns? Or at what point does the cost effectiveness start being a little bit less competitive with other types of non-structural BMPs. But to this point, you know, the baseline recommendation is getting the cities to do more sweeping than they're doing now for a vast majority of cities, as Val pointed out earlier. And I think that's probably a good first goal in terms of implementation here, is to get cities up to a baseline condition. And then as the years go on, figure out if, you know, this is something we want to consider even pushing a little bit farther. And maybe if we're you know, requesting an additional spring sweeping, or maybe doing even more fall street sweeping, especially in those targeted areas. So. I not hearing any other questions right now. I'll just finish up here with the last couple of items that are sort of the I think key elements for board and district consideration here. So again, this is that sort of baseline recommendation. And I think we've talked about a little bit through this follow-up conversation and questions about some of these next points. But you know, one element that Paige and I have been talking a lot about is how do we approach this going into 2023? And so there's a couple questions there in terms of, is there sufficient budget in the existing stewardship grant program to support doing enhanced street sweeping? And if so, what's the best strategy for implementing that? So the terms that we've kind of come up with to describe different strategies here is one would be targeted. So a targeted approach here would be to actively seek out those cities that are maybe well under that sort of baseline recommendation, where you're going to get the most benefit from doing enhanced sweeping or getting up to that baseline recommendation. And a second strategy would be to do sort of more like a traditional application based, where you advertise the program, you allow member cities to reach out via an application, and you judge the merits of those applications and decide who gets funding if there is not enough funding to support all applicants. Suggested approaches for 2023 and future years are maybe a little bit different. So for 2023, considering that there has not to this point been a budget increase in the stewardship grant program to support street sweeping, it might be best to use more of a targeted approach going into 2023, where we have a little bit more control over what cities we reach out to and how much funding we're willing to support to those particular cities. With the concern being, if you opened up an application-based system and you had 7 cities that were interested in pursuing this, it might be a lot of no's to a lot of cities, just based on, we just don't have the budget this year to cover all of those sorts of requests. So, so again, an initial suggestion might be to start with a targeted implementation strategy, and then going into future years, at a certain point, that might shift to more of an application-based strategy, especially as more of the cities actually get up to that baseline condition.
Are you open for a question on that one as well?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I was a little curious because I like the idea of doing some sort of staged thing, right? Especially given what Diane said in terms of where they are and setting their own personal budgets. Is there another maybe initial step to help some of those more targeted areas that may be below the number of street sweeps we recommend, to offer grants in those areas to get them closer to baseline? Did you guys discuss that? And if so, did you weigh what were your pros and cons?
I think if I understood the question correctly here, and please feel free to correct me if I didn't, you know, I think that's exactly what we're trying to do here. And I actually, on a follow-up slide, I've got a sort of breakdown of a ranking strategy to sort of rank the member cities in terms of in which cities is the prioritization ranking the highest. And that ranking also then considers, and how much are we increasing phosphorus reduction from going from baseline, or from going existing conditions to the baseline recommendation. So yeah, within the study, we definitely did make an attempt to figure out which are those member cities that we should reach out to first, based solely on the merits of where we're getting the most bang for our buck, and which cities have that the highest priority areas for sweeping.
Well, and let me just really quickly clarify, because I think you're close, but right now, one of the things before is like, do we use the baseline as a way to do grants, right? This is a separate question, but it's related. You know, do we only allow targeted areas and expand? I'm kind of doing a mix of both. So in that area that you picked, where it's a big increase from where they're sweeping now to the baseline, is there like a next year activity, or maybe next couple of years activities to say, we'll provide a grant for you to get toward baseline as opposed to do more? That's kind of what I was trying to dig at. I think you answered it partially, but not completely.
Val, and do you mean regardless of whether it's in an impaired watershed or not?
No, I'm thinking only in those targeted critical areas, honestly,
Okay.
Aaron.
Got it.
Is what I was thinking, but we can discuss it later. I was just curious because I know you guys probably thought through 8 or 10 other ideas on how to fund. I was just kind of curious if that was one of them.
Yeah, and I think it's a really good question. And because we're at this point where we're kind of trying to help facilitate making those decisions, a lot of this study is focused more on sort of actually, you know, again, in this table that I'll show on this next slide here, we have those rankings broken out based on, you know, total recovery, as well as total reduction, as well as total reduction in targeted watersheds. But there's definitely some next steps here that have not yet been considered in this study. For example, you know, if we support a city's operations to get them up to a baseline condition for 1 year, does that mean you're supporting that indefinitely? Does that mean you're supporting that in year 2 or year 3? Or are you helping them get to a point where they can maintain this level of sweeping on their own? And from that perspective, there might be more incentive to help cities acquire equipment and acquire new hires, and maybe a little bit less incentive on doing a one-time contracted sweeping effort. But with that said, even those one-time contracted sweeping efforts are very cost efficient. So it's tough to say, no, don't do that. We want you to be more self-sufficient, more self-sustaining in these systems, when there is a very significant cost benefit to actually doing even contracted sweeping. So it's a complicated issue from that perspective, but that is definitely, I think, a good next step for this study, and maybe going into future years, is to figure out what are those steps to help cities become self-sustaining and to do this sweeping without additional district support. So really, really good comment, Val.
Yeah, Michael, I have a question to be for you. Have you had some thought into like equity, like some city, you know, with regard to like how much funding per capita is being put into each city, where it seems like Woodbury is pretty crappy and North St. Paul's pretty good? And are we just going to go help Woodbury, who just hasn't invested in this, and then North St. Paul, who spent all this money on it, do they just get poo-pooed? So can you address that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that is something that has come up in discussions about this prioritization, because you know, when we look at, we can parse out our prioritization based solely on where are the highest priority areas throughout the district, and that's super useful because that's equitable. That does not account for the fact that North St. Paul is already exceeding street sweeping operations. So we do have ranking strategies that are based on just that. What is that raw benefit? What is the raw prioritization information tell us? But, you know, I think when it comes to these questions of equity, at a certain point, there's also that there is the real consideration of, well, this city is only doing 2 sweepings per year. If we get them up to a baseline recommendation, that's a plus 62 pounds per year of phosphorus removed. And the recommendation to the city of, for example, North St. Paul would be, they might already be at that point where they're starting to get not diminishing returns, but you're starting to get sort of less benefit from doing additional sweepings. So from that standpoint of equity, yeah, it's not exactly fair to the city of North St. Paul, who's already meeting and exceeding those street sweeping goals. But from the perspective of, you know, providing the maximum benefit to district managed water bodies and BMPs throughout the watershed, there's definitely a bigger incentive to reach out to those cities who are currently doing less than those who are doing more. And I do appreciate the fact that that's not exactly equitable. But it's a difficult consideration, especially from the consideration of a publicly funded grant program. So that's kind of why we tried to do it in both ways. to allow the board and the district to have different ways to parse out what grant funding requests actually get supported and which ones don't. But
I would
really good
also
question.
say, if I may, another thing I would add to that is that it does get really tricky though, if we're trying to assess what is equitable in terms of cities that are putting a lot of money into street sweeping versus not. There's also differences in the way that cities are approaching retrofit projects and other types of water quality improvements throughout their domains. So, you know, I know when I look at the projects that have gone into North St. Paul, for example, that drain to Coleman Lake, and when we track the projects year by year in terms of the TMDL reporting, there are a lot more projects that have gone in certain areas than in others. And so, you know, North St. Paul may be choosing to some degree to put their money into street sweeping and not so much into targeted retrofits. Now, I don't know if that's 100% true, but I mentioned that in that there are a lot of different ways. If we really wanted to assess what city is doing what in the name of water quality, it could get quite complicated. So it's tricky to know if we should just be looking at how different cities are applying street sweeping, for example, to figure out where we should put the money. It's perhaps more straightforward to look at it from the just basic conditions, who's not meeting the baseline and why, and could grants increase the prevalence of that.
It's a very good point, Erin. Yeah, there's the equity question gets very complicated for sure. But it's one that's important to think about. So.
But that brings up the issue of how much money are we talking about to put in this program? And really, why are we taking it out of the stewardship fund instead of establishing a separate fund? It isn't obvious to me in the stewardship program that we ever put a limit on total expenditure for a type of project. We do have a limit on a particular project of how much it has, but we don't say like we can only have 15 rain gardens this year. So
I can jump in, and I mean, as a staff, sometimes we'll parse out and say, okay, this is how much we might spend. This was maybe a little different because we used to do some of our targeted retrofit projects and then we established a fund, but we would do that. We would kind of earmark, you know, a certain amount of that money for a certain project or a certain type of project.
We did do that. Oh, sorry, Tina, I was just gonna jump in for the public art. I think we set a limit, like 50,000. That's what could go to public art.
Oh, and I do have a little cost breakdown of what it might take to support a given application request, just to give an idea for order of magnitude. And you know, from Paige's previous presentation, you know, we kind of know what that average cost per project is that's currently being supported via the stewardship grant program, and we can kind of review how some of those numbers compare. But yeah, that is a good point. Is this going to be competing with the other funding within the existing stewardship grant program? So that's an important consideration.
And I think, I don't know if this kind of piggybacks on what Tina was saying, Larry, but so for 2023, we weren't at the point to budget separately for street sweeping. So I think that's why we were proposing to take some, you know, maybe it's just shooting out a number, but what we have for carryover this year was 125,000. So that's funds that weren't used for projects that are in the ground or design costs or anything like that. So maybe we take a number like that and set that aside, and we can reassess. You know, I think most cities would like to know early on if they're going to have that, but we can reassess also throughout the year as we see how we're spending grant funds, and then we know what we should budget for in 2024, whether it's you know, a separate line item like the targeted retrofits or something else.
Yeah, and again, there is a little bit of a cost breakdown. It's going to be a little bit city to city dependent because these cities have a lot different geographical areas, but there are some ways to start thinking about what kind of costs might be requested to support via this program. So we will have some numbers later on here, just in a couple slides to give a little bit of context there. I'll jump back to the presentation here. Okay, I already talked about this, so I'll skip over this slide. This is sort of one strategy for developing a sort of targeted approach, where we, again, we've got a lot of different ways to break out that strategy in terms of, should we reach out to cities based on that raw recovery rank in the most equitable way, or should we also try and consider how much they are improving from the baseline condition? So there's several different ways to break that out and figure out which cities should be targeted first or second or third via a sort of more targeted approach. Skip through that. So last but not least, and this is something we were just talking about, so I can probably skip over this slide a little bit too. This is sort of thinking about stewardship grant funding just as a pot of money to support street sweeping. Is this something where this stewardship grant program total budget should be enhanced to help support these street sweeping efforts? Is it something we can do with the amount of budget that has been allocated to the stewardship grant program in previous years? So of course, as Paige mentioned, in 2023, there wasn't, or going into 2023, there hasn't really even been an opportunity to change that budget. So I think 2023 will be a really great case study year for figuring out if we have enough funding within the current program to support these efforts, or maybe there needs to be more so we can support more efforts. So again, I think 2023 will serve as an interesting sort of case study year for implementing street sweeping support through the stewardship grant program. So that's sort of just outlined here in these next steps. And again, we've talked about this a little, so skip over this here. So just getting to the question of, well, how much funding should we expect to contribute to a given city's enhanced sweeping efforts? There's several different ways to get at this. One is sort of coming up with, maybe a default sort of cost per lane mile that the district is willing to provide to help enhance street sweeping programs. And, this gets at some of the points that Val brought up earlier is, are we talking about, are they contracting the street sweeping? Are they trying to actually buy more equipment? Because there's, I think, an incentive to, in some ways, if we want to get these cities to be more self-sustaining in street sweeping, and that additional sweeper is what they need to get there, that might be a preferred strategy over just contracting out sweeping year to year. But again, that might not be realistic based on cities' budgets and ability to actually complete the street sweeping based on staff on hand. So just to kind of show some examples of like, well, what are these sorts of costs per lane mile? There's a variety of different values that have gotten thrown out. In a study that EOR completed for Woodbury, they estimated it would be $102 per lane mile for contracted versus about $93 per lane mile for owned. That number gets more and more efficient the more numbers of sweepings you do per year. So there's a little bit of a caveat on that owned number. But at the end of the day, Woodbury's program request for 2022 actually came out closer to $150 per lane mile, and that was a contracted effort. So even just from going from that study to real world results, there was a little bit of a discrepancy. We requested from all of the member cities that they provide their street sweeping annual budget, as well as, and we were able to calculate the lane miles within each given city. So we were able to calculate based on that survey information that Maplewood is about $140 per lane mile, and North St. Paul is about $187 per lane mile. Those were the cities that were easiest to analyze because the majority of the municipal area is actually in the district. So numbers a little bit all over the place, but maybe kind of hovering around $150 per lane mile is a good estimate for coming up with a cost to support more street sweeping efforts. So just to do an applied example here. So Little Canada is currently doing one spring, one summer, one fall. So if we wanted to get them to a baseline recommendation of doing 3 sweepings in the fall as opposed to 1, I won't go through all the maths here, but basically that would come out to, depending on that, is the cost $90 per lane mile, or is it $175 per lane mile? That might depend based on, did they contract? Are they using staff? What are their staff costs? But it could be a range anywhere from $21,000 to $42,000 to support doing those additional 2 sweepings in a given year. Again, just I actually threw this into the slide while Paige was presenting, because I was like, oh, that's a really interesting number, is that $17,000 is sort of the average stewardship grant program cost. So you can see it's higher than the average program cost for sure. But some of those program costs we're talking about, a lot smaller water quality features and less water quality benefits. So there's some considerations there. So based on the results of the model, that would be an additional 34 pounds per year from going from 1 fall sweeping to 3 fall sweepings. So that would come out to a cost benefit of somewhere between $600 and $1,200 per pound removed. Pretty compelling numbers from the standpoint of cost benefit analysis. So again, this is just one sort of example of what would it take to get Little Canada there. It's going to be different for different cities based on the numbers of lane mile actually within the district. But I think there is the possibility to get a consistent implementation strategy where maybe Ramsey-Washington says, hey, we'll support up to $75 per lane mile or $100 per lane mile. So that's another approach if it wasn't, maybe more of a cost sharing type approach rather than just an outright, we're going to pay for the cost of you doing the additional 2 sweepings per year.
And Michael, this is Tina. I have a follow-up or clarifying question.
Yeah.
This is for them to do their whole city, not just in priority or red areas. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. So a lot of this cost analysis ends up being sort of broken down for the city doing a consistent sweep across the entire city. So this is not focused on only doing those 3 sweepings only in priority areas. This is going from 1 sweeping to 3 fall sweepings for the entire city. So yeah, you can imagine if they wanted to only do 3 sweepings in maybe certain priority areas, that total program cost could be significantly less. And then of course your pounds of reduction would also be less, but by targeting those areas, you're again just trying to get to that point where you're again getting the kind of most bang for your buck for doing this enhanced sweeping. So good point, Tina. Yeah, this was for the entire city.
Okay, thanks.
And so $50,000 was provided to the city of Woodbury, and that came out to about $150 per lane mile. So that example also kind of lives within this realm of costs that could be incurred by directly supporting a city's efforts to get from what they're doing now to the full sort of baseline recommendation.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Couldn't we just make a rule that all cities have to do the minimum BMP street sweeping every year, and then we can consider some grants beyond that? Tina?
Yeah, I don't know if we can make that. Maybe I'll let Tina answer that.
It wouldn't necessarily be in our rules. Maybe cooperative agreements with the cities, but we wouldn't have any authority to require them to do that.
I think one of the hard things, and we had a Metro cost share team meeting about this maybe about a month or so ago, but was putting in perspective, cities have a lot, our main focus is water quality. So that's obviously high on our priority list. Cities have a lot of other things they're budgeting for, and most cities answered in our survey, they understand street sweeping is important for water quality. They want to do more, but it's all these other factors that play into not making that happen.
I will say though that there could be a way through their TMDL. So in areas where we have TMDLs, where the cities are required to meet certain load reductions, this data that we've developed through this study could help them prioritize street sweeping as a means of meeting those TMDLs. So maybe kind of a not necessarily a rule, but a way, providing them more information so that they feel like they can use that then for their team deals. And that was the whole point of the calculator that was developed, is to, be able to quantify the credit that cities can get for doing this work.
Yeah, that's a very good point, is there might be some additional incentives for cities just in terms of meeting those waste load allocation requirements in a given TMDL. So yeah, good point. And don't worry, that's basically it for the presentation. There's not it's basically just the last slide here is just a list of activities that the district may consider supporting through the stewardship grant program. So I think I could definitely put some asterisks on some of these that are more about getting the cities to be a little bit more self-sustaining in those in their sweeping operations. For example, purchasing additional sweepers, getting additional screening material or materials that help them screen more efficiently. Those sort of things that are improving their program in the long term, may be considered with slightly higher priority than, for example, just contracting out that additional sweeping. But again, contracting that still ends up being a fairly cost efficient way to get the sweeping done. And if that's the only way it can get done for certain member cities, I think that's also worth entertaining through the stewardship grant program.
I'm going to throw out a couple of things, Michael, and see if you can put you on the spot. But one of the items that came up in the discussion at the MOG conference presentation was about, the words they used was put a bounty on phosphorus or on the sediment, basically paying based on the weight of sediment, which equals a certain amount of phosphorus. What were your feelings on that?
I think that's a super interesting strategy. That's I think you can definitely think of that as a sort of crediting program where now cities have an economic incentive to actually go out and do more sweeping. I think some of the issues that you might run into if utilizing an approach like that is that a city might not know, based on their existing sweeping operations, if they're not routinely getting those weights, they might not have a good estimate of how much more tonnage they're going to get by doing this additional 2 to 3 sweepings in a given season. And it could be one of those things where you might find out that you got burned a little bit if you thought you were going to get a lot more tonnage than you did, and the city had run those calculations to buy a new sweeper. Math didn't work out for them. They got less money than they were anticipating. It could be, it's one of those sort of chicken and egg type situations where, because they might be needing to acquire more material, or they might be needing to contract more sweeping, they might need some support to get those initial funds or to get that process started and figure out how much they're actually able to recover from doing a baseline condition in a given year. But I definitely really do like the idea of making this a results-based program where you're incentivizing people to get as much weight as they can by actually doing these sweepings. I think that makes a lot of sense. And my only concern there is just from a planning perspective, from the city's perspective, is it might be a little bit difficult to figure out if the math is going to work out for them to make that big investment. And that's something they might have a better feel for after maybe actually doing a year where they actually accomplish that baseline recommendation and seeing how much tonnage they get. That might help them figure out for future years how that math works out for them. And that would be another really interesting area of study, is figuring out, okay, what's the right number to put on that bounty on phosphorus as it relates to street sweeping. But really cool strategy, really fun to think about, and might be something to consider implementation of. Again, probably tough to do in a sort of 2023 implementation type years to figure out those next steps. And again, just from my worry that a city's not going to be able to figure out how that math works out for them without having actually done enhanced sweeping for a year or a season. So
thanks. The other thing I wanted just to throw out there as an option, and it's taking a little bit different road than, partnering with our cities on this project, but the opportunity is there for the district to contract for street sweeping and to perform the enhanced street sweeping in the priority areas that we would identify as a BMP ourselves too. Kind of taking out the middleman a little bit. If that's something that would be of interest to the board, we can look at that as well.
I just wanted to comment that this is a macro strategy, and as the targeted retrofits are, and we do micro strategies with rain gardens. Have we thought about offering a small stipend for people who adopt drains? The whole point is to keep this stuff out of the water, or, and if we could get more drains taken care of for a very small amount of money, that could be as effective as a rain gardens.
That's a really good point. We actually, in the memo, there's in the recommendation section at the end, that is actually something that we've heard from other successful street sweeping programs is implementation of an adopt the drain program. There's obviously nowadays there's really cool app-based ways to do that, where residents can actually go out and say, yep, I cleaned the catch basin, or I removed the leaves from the gutter, and they can check that off. And that can be really useful from a city maintenance perspective to figure out, okay, maybe we can be a little bit less concerned with inlet maintenance here, and we don't have any adopted drains over here, so maybe we need to spend a little bit more time sweeping over in this area. So yeah, really, really interesting idea to, these adopted drain programs that I'm familiar with are sort of Good Samaritan type programs, where you sign up if you're an interested member and you go out and you do it as, again, just a sort of way to support your community. But interesting concept for sure to incentivize that through some sort of funding program. But I haven't heard of adopted drain programs that have taken it to that next step. But interesting way to incentivize maybe a little bit more thorough adoption of the adopted drain program for sure.
Yeah, and we do have, so I think Sage, Tina, I don't know if you have looked at it recently, but I think Sage has access to like our adopted drain info. So we know which drains in our district have been adopted. And I think we have pretty good success, and people report what they've cleaned every year. Yeah, and a lot of them are signed. So they have signs out there showing that they're adopted, to make people aware that they could look for an open drain and adopt that as well.
Yeah, and in some cases they do report how much they remove. Not everybody, because it, like you said, it is a good steward, kind of Good Samaritan project, but it would be interesting to think about monetizing that with some, qualifiers for removing, a certain amount, or having, showing us how much they're removing. That could be interesting.
Yeah, that was the last slide there. So yeah, it went a little bit longer than I anticipated. Sorry if that was longer than we were hoping to have this discussion, but I think we're at a really interesting point in figuring out how to implement enhanced street sweeping, either via this stewardship program or via, a separate funding effort. I think 2023 will be a really interesting year for us coming together and sort of figuring out what the best strategy there is.
Turn that on. Tina, if I may, there's no need to answer this question. I found this to be an extraordinarily compelling report. And to the degree possible, I sure would hope that we're able to share this, not just within our industry, but I'm thinking of groups like League of Minnesota Cities, University of Minnesota, MPCA, et cetera. No need to respond. I just, again, thought this was really good body of work.
Yes, thank you. Definitely, we'll be sharing it. There's a good group of research and studies going on in this topic. There was 3 presentations at MOD related, at least to a component of this. Ours was more of the application based, like now what, after we have all this data and this information, now what do we do with it? And I know there's a lot of people who are interested in following along in the story. So we'll definitely be sharing.
And Matt, Matt, after the sorry, Erin, presentation, Michael and I connected with a couple people from the U of M. So we'll definitely be talking with them more.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it was a well-attended session at Maud. I think it got a lot of interest. So to your point, I think it's definitely a topic of a lot of interest in the watershed community these days.
Like I said, that I learned that the Stormwater Research Council has a major project on this too, to try to get credits official from doing. So what do you want us to do with this? Are we going to section off a part of the stewardship fund and say that's set aside for street sweeping? Because again, if the cities are going to have to, or we're going to have to make a decision early on what it is we want to support. And that takes it out of that budget for as it stands right now, which is why ultimately I think we're better off to have this in a separate fund. It's kind of to me, it doesn't seem the same as the other things that are in the stewardship grant. It's just different and probably ought to be managed differently. But to get it going, what are we going to do? What kind of limit are we going to set on ourselves? And then how are we going to implement that? And how are we going to tell if it worked?
My recommendation is that, like Paige mentioned, we take what was considered carryover from 2022 into 2023, which was around 150.
Yeah, it was like 128.
128. And my recommendation would be to go with a targeted approach where we prioritize areas or cities or areas within cities to offer this to the cities. Again, it's a little bit like the Woodbury case where we would offer them a certain amount of money. We would monitor, see how much they're collecting, see how that, cost per mile is playing out, actually see if it makes a difference in their ability to be able to do the enhanced sweeping, and then evaluate for 2020, as we get into budget season for 2024, evaluate that program that we've started to establish, pilot, I guess.
So basically the concept is take the money we have left over in the stewardship fund, put it in a little separate area, which I guess is what I was talking about. Leave the stewardship fund at $1 million as it stands right now. Put this $128,000 off to the side and see what we can develop with the cities to get this program going and to find out if it actually works. Because one of the, I guess, concerns that I have is that it is successful and then it's a huge investment that has to be done. It'll be different than what the stewardship fund is, I think. That's my point of view on this. Because the only other thing that I can see that we've ever done in here that's like this, mostly the stewardship fund is you do a program and it's there and it doesn't go on forever and ever and ever, except for aquatic harvest. That's the one thing that is sort of like this. So maybe we develop a segment in the budget that says this is how much we're going to devote for those kind of things that recur all the time in the same place.
Yeah, I think that's good. To be clear, I think when we give them funds for 2023, it will only, we wouldn't be dedicating it to be a recurring. But yes, it is a recurring kind of project, like you said.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting to see that you explain that to them. That this is really important to do on an ongoing basis, but we're going to give you the money to do it once a year.
Yeah.
The implication is they're going to have to pony up themselves. And, you're gonna kind of signal whether it really is important or whether it really is not important at that.
Yeah, I think what I'm sensing is that most of the cities won't be able to add this to their program themselves and that they'll end up contracting it out. I mean, that's the sense I'm getting for most cities.
And none of them can for 2023 because their budgets are set, which is
Yeah.
why it's kind of a, you know, here's what you can do and make a big difference and hopefully sell them on adding them to further budgets.
Yeah, and that's why I would like to use the targeted approach so that we can hit the highest priority areas with that money. And not just blanket it, you know, to a whole city to do the whole city.
You know, one thought that I would just add here is in terms of tracking progress or, you know, figuring out, did it work? Did we get the benefit we were hoping for? There might be an additional recommendation here to you know, require, if there is going to be funding support for this, to require the cities to actually pull weights per sweeping. The logistics of that, I'm not actually aware if the cities are typically doing their weights for an entire season all at one go, or if they're actually doing the weights per truck. But if they are doing the weights per truck, that would be a super interesting way to track, okay, what weights did you get in your first run? What weights did you get in your second run? What weights did you get in your third run? And using the MPCA tool, there's an MPCA calculator out there that's based on that U of M study I was talking about, that provides a estimated total phosphorus reduction associated with that weight. I really like that approach because that's, you know, this prioritization study is based on the number of sweepings that occur in a year, but that doesn't necessarily equate to exactly what the tonnage that you removed from the watershed. So I think, you know, encouraging people to pull those weights and use that U of M calculator, or MPCA calculator rather, to calculate total phosphorus reductions might be a really good way to actually demonstrate that, yes, there was benefit from going out and doing that second or doing that third sweep.
Okay, so what are we gonna do?
Do we need to do anything?
I think if the board is supportive of us moving forward with a targeted approach using $125,000 out of stewardship grant fund earmarked for that approach, we would bring forward any proposals that we would move forward. We would come back to the board with our approach, with who we're going to target, what areas we're going to target, and how much we would offer to those cities for those areas. So you could see that ahead of time.
And I would encourage what Diana was talking about too, was to work with the CAC or somebody to see about enhancing the Adopt a Drain program. Because I know that where I live, it's right downhill, and I go out with a snow shovel and shovel the leaves out, and I get that I do that the day before the street sweeper shows up, always, ever. But if other people, if they were getting paid like $200 or something like that, they could maybe reduce the amount of money that you needed to do street sweeping. Because a big part of street sweeping is stopping, emptying the street sweeper, putting it in a truck, finding a place to, it's not just the sweeping part about it, it's the whole logistical deal. And if you had people getting the leaves out of there, if you incentivize them to do a better job of that, that may make the whole program more cost effective.
Good idea. And also the focus on education to the public.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, that's definitely something we'll have a conversation with the Adopt a Drain group.
Or whatever they are, yeah.
Well, and see if Lauren can do some kind of a press release on this study, you know, it's
Sure.
interesting.
Mhm.
And if you're gonna get cities to commit to it, you're gonna need to get the electorate to be interested in it, in that they want it to be a priority, so a multi-pronged approach will get us the best bang
Yep.
for our buck.
So effectively, and this is something I think I'm hearing is just when you come back with that proposal with the targeted cities, it sounds like we're asking for a communication strategy proposal too. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep. Yes, that's what I've heard.
Sure.
Okay, so I guess that's what come down to. We can take $128,000. Determine how we can best use that, look at enhancing something like an adopted drain program. Maybe that's the wrong, maybe we have our own program, so we don't have to get caught up in the bureaucracy. But and use that to develop a program to see what's a reasonable way to handle this. Because I think it's a good thing to do. It's just maintaining control of it and getting it to be really effective that are more the key issues from my point of view than whether or not street sweeping is a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a great thing.
Just to clarify, that $128,000 is for enhanced street sweeping. But you also would like us to look at a way of incentivizing residents to do drain cleaning as well.
Look at that as your fund to figure out what's the best way to approach the issue of getting stuff out of the streets. So both.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And a communications campaign.
And a communications campaign, yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay. Are we all good?
Are
Paige,
we-
you good? I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
thank you.
Okay.
Yes, quick question, Larry, and just to clarify, so when we come forward with the recommendation, we'll have another opportunity to talk through finer details? Like I'm a little worried about what it means to purchase sweeping equipment versus some of the other assumptions. So I feel like it'd be good to talk through those in detail, but I like where the direction is, but just maybe at a later date when we get the proposal, we can have more of a discussion around that.
Yeah, I fully agree, because I think as you start to develop a program, that you're going to get a lot of input from the member cities, I guess, more than anything, as to what they want. Like Tina, you mentioned, we talked about it before. Do we do the contracting and just send the street, which has a little bit of a problem because you got to get the cars out of the way and all that sort of stuff. So. You know, it's a great idea, but I think it's sort of in its infant stage right now.
Yep.
I'm personally comfortable with, if we have a limited amount of money that we're going to put against it, that we're not going to compromise the rest of the stewardship fund, so that we still have that amount of money for what it was really intended for. I'm okay with that, and let's find out where it goes from here. I mean, we kind of a wishy-washy thing to say, but I think that's what we're going to have to do, is to get interactive with the cities and see what they would want, what they would want to support.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yeah, can't wait for the meeting minutes right up on that. Okay. Item 11, administrators report.
Yeah, so I have some information there for meetings attended, upcoming meetings. I want to make sure I point out the holiday gathering for the watershed staff and board is planned for Wednesday, December 21st at 11:30. So we'd love to have you if you are able to attend, and that also goes out to Tracy and Aaron as well, if you haven't already received any communication from us on that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Should we be bringing anything or do we just show up? Nope.
I think we probably have the food covered, although you could bring maybe some sweet treats if you have any special baked goods that you have. Otherwise, I think Paige, you think we're good on food?
Okay.
I think so. We usually have a lot.
Yeah. Yep. The mod annual meeting was last week. It was great to be back in person. It was well attended. There was a lot of illnesses floating around, apparently.
Yeah.
A lot of us came back sick, so that wasn't great, but there was a number of presentations as well as awards, and the luncheon speaker was Paul Gardner, who is the Clean Water Council staff person, also a member, lives in Shoreview and in our watershed, and has been a friend of the watershed for a long time. And he gave a great presentation on the Clean Water Fund and the work that's being done on that. So that was great. I don't know if other staff have anything they want to share that were up there. Like I said, there was a lot of street sweeping discussion. Paige and Michael did a great job. They had a standing room only presentation and fielded a lot of great questions that led to some great discussion. So I was very happy to see that as well. As far as the business,
Pass around for us.
as far as the business meeting, all of the resolutions went forward except for the one we already talked about. The new strategic plan was approved for MOD. They hired Jan Voigt. She's no longer the interim executive director of MOD. She's now the full-on executive director of MOD, at least for the next year or so. So it was good because I think that it was a very positive move forward for MOD. There was some new board members that were appointed as well at their meeting on Saturday morning. So for the MOD board members. There was a lot of discussion around the resolutions for the future and what that might look like. You know, as was in the strategic plan, the idea is that there would be a platform instead of these individual resolutions. There would be a broader platform that the watersheds would move forward legislatively. So that will be in the works, I think, this year. You'll probably hear a lot more about that at Legislative Days, which is in February this year, February, I think, 15th and 16th. And I think, so the strategic plan mentions a name change. I'm not sure they can just change the name without changing like the bylaws and stuff, but I think they're moving forward with Minnesota Watersheds as the new MOD name moving forward. So you might see that in communications.
So it's going from MOD to MA?
Ma. From moi. Yeah. Everyone will always call it MOD, so it'll just be what it is. But and that was a move to be more inclusive of other watershed organizations that aren't watershed districts. So that was the thought on that. I think that's it for MOD. I had the wetland workshop scheduling on here. As we know, we postponed that. I guess I'm not there, so I didn't have I was gonna have a calendar printed out and I forgot to have Nicole do that.
Nicole's doing it. She's doing it right now.
Oh, she is?
She's on.
So then you guys can just mark out the dates that work or don't work, however you want to do that. Unless January 18th works for everybody, and then I would just pick that day.
I think we should see if it does.
Okay.
January what?
18th, it's a Wednesday.
It's the third Wednesday, yeah. Thanks, Nicole.
Yeah.
And then the last thing was about the 4th of July holiday and the meeting date for that week. So being that meeting would be normally scheduled on July 5th as we prepare our calendar for the year. Just wanted to get that discussion out there so we changes things like billing and other items as we move forward, and permits and stuff, so.
And Tina, you said January 18th is your preferred date to have a special meeting with us board members?
Yeah, for the workshop, wetlands workshop.
That works for me.
That works for me.
Me too.
Works for me. We're done.
Well,
How about you,
Val,
Val?
I would-
Well, Val? All right, let's just
Yeah.
plan it.
Anyway,
January 18th. I guess I should make sure our staff are good with that too, but
I'm blocking Greg Williams' calendar right now
All right.
as we speak.
perfect. Good, we're good. And then how do you feel about the January or July meeting date?
Good.
Keeping it the 5th or moving it to the 28th?
Move it to the 28th.
Okay, everybody, I guess I'd take a motion to officially move the board meeting date.
I mean, I don't really care, so, but if some people care, that's fine with me. So some people care, I guess, you care?
It potentially, I mean, I can make it work, but it is, the day after holiday, if people were to make plans for that week, then I want to make sure we're open to.
And
Okay,
that's moving it to June 28th or July 28th.
June 28th, sorry, the week before.
I think he said, yeah, so we move the July meeting to June 28th.
Second.
okay, any discussion other than what we just had? Okay, roll call.
Pam, Matt, Diane,
I,
and Larry.
Aye. Okay. Okay, great.
Everything else is informational, isn't it?
Yeah, where do we stand with West Vadnais boundary change?
Well, that was a good part of Mod. I was able to connect with our new board conservationist on that. And we have a meeting scheduled for next week. So we should have that. Bowser should be good. It was a staffing change issue with them. So we should be able to move forward with that at the
Yeah.
end of the year.
Have we done any more with the land use policy?
I don't have anything new to report at this time, no.
Have we talked to anybody about the thing that drove that, which is the golf course that's disappearing or something?
Yeah, yep. So a couple months back, I think I gave an update on my conversations with Ramsey County and the city of Maplewood about that. I mean, specifically regarding ponds at Battle Creek, there is a commitment from Ramsey County to keep and protect the natural areas, wetlands and buffers and green space in that area. So where we left off with that was as plans for potential selling of that property or buying, although there's no specific plans at this time. We definitely have a seat at the table to put easements, conservation easements, or protected areas on that development site, but there's just really not a lot of interest in purchasing that property right now. But I have connections with the people who will keep me updated as that changes.
Tina, could that land acquisition policy and the West Vadnais status either be a continuing thing on your administrator's report or go on the manager's log?
No, it should be in the, I don't know how that section fell off my administrator's report. It would normally be there. I apologize.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And I just have a couple little things. One on the inspection rating report, we were very interested in that and wrote it and wanted to see the results, but just getting the high level scores didn't really tell me much. Would there be a way to see the detail of how each one was graded, or at least some samples?
I guess, yeah, if there's particular sites you're interested in, we can get the scoring sheets. I mean, there's a lot of them, right? So I don't necessarily want to print them. Well, I won't print them, but send them all to you. But if there's particular ones that you're interested in, sure.
I'll think about that, but maybe even giving us an example of one that scored low and one that scored high. Would be
Sure.
interesting.
Yep, sure.
And then the other thing for the board, this year's gone by fast, so we need to be thinking about Tina's evaluation. Kind of did it late last year, but we made a commitment to get it back onto a regular schedule.
Could we tie that into the January meeting?
We could, or we could meet before the February meeting. Either one. So I'm thinking we didn't really meet before until April, so I was kind of thinking February would be be a little better, but either one. And I'd like to propose we meet the hour before a regular meeting, unless you want to have a separate meeting.
I like the idea where we meet at that bar over there. We literally did used to have breakfast at Perkins for this meeting, so I don't see any reason why we literally couldn't meet at that bar over there and have this meeting. And would that be more?
Just has to be noticed. Well, and it's
Tracy,
technically a closed meeting.
Yeah.
We're reserved table. It's an idea.
It can
Throwing
be
it out
closed if
there.
it's, it can be closed if it's regarding your performance, Tina, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what we
it's a
wanted to
closed
do.
meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
I would prefer to have it at the office, but,
Okay, fine.
So.
and I'd be good with the hour.
February.
I would vote for February, because the January meeting comes right on the heels of all of the holidays.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
mhm,
Hour before February?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we can meet with Tina and then I can do the follow-up paperwork.
Right.
Have that done. And last time at the next meeting, we made a formal note, which we could do at the March meeting. That was all.
I wanted to confirm that too. I think we're doing our annual meetings now in February, right, Tina? Because I think we put things out for bid again this year. I think we're on for the,
No, I think that was last year.
was
We
that
did
last
the-
year? Oh,
yeah.
I thought it was this year. Maybe it must be Valley Branch that's this year. Sorry, I thought it was ours.
No, we have another year before we officially get the proposals.
Okay, good. I was thinking it was this year. Thanks.
Yeah. We've been doing our annual meeting in February,
Yeah.
or actually, no, well, yes. Actually, last couple of years we've done March because we have potentially new board members that come in February. And so we wanted to do it in March so that for election of officers, there could be
That's
changes.
right.
So
That's right.
yes, we have been doing it in March, actually.
Okay, thanks.
Exactly.
Okay. That was
Okay.
it for me.
Okay, anybody else got anything?
Oh, I just wanted to compliment Bill in getting that $70-some thousand grant, and I was really impressed with that section and how much has been done and how much will be done on shoreline restoration. Kudos to the team, and it was nice to see.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Sounds good. Okay.
I move we adjourn.
Holidays,
Thank you
everybody.
very much. Bye.
Right this way. See you all.
Bye.
Yes,
Hope
bye
you all feel
everyone.
better,
Thank you.
Val, Tina, hope you feel
Thank
better.
you. Yeah.
Hang in there, Val. You're not alone.